Welcome to Markets Plus, where leading experts from across BMO discuss factors shaping the markets, economy, industry sectors, and much more. Visit bmocm.com/Markets Plus for more episodes.
Hi in Canton Kaubünden, where at 1,560 meters above sea level, the air is thin and the motorcades are plentiful, and the world just took a very sharp turn in Davos. I'm Laurence Mussio. I'm chair of the Long Run Institute and special advisor to the CEO of BMO Financial Group. Now, in this corner of Switzerland, it's famous for the Romansh language. It's beautiful, ancient, it's very resilient. Though for 1 week each January, the official dialect in Davos shifts unmistakably to what we might call plutocrat, the patois of power, the lingua franca of capital seeking safe harbor. But beyond the security cordons, the private chalets and the theatrical motorcades and all of that, what was it actually like this year? We've seen the headlines. It's been a really consequential World Economic Forum. Donald Trump eyeing Greenland as though it were a prime parcel of Manhattan real estate available for acquisition. Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, delivering what amounted to a strategic ultimatum. If we're not at the table, we'll be on the menu. And meanwhile, there was also techno-optimists that proclaimed a new age of AI abundance, even as the old architecture of the global order groaned audibly under the strain. So today, we have the ultimate insider's view. Joining us is Deland Kamanga, Group Head of Wealth Management at Bank of Montreal Financial Group, and one of 850 delegates to the World Economic Forum. So welcome to you, Del. You were an eyewitness to what historians may one day call a hinge moment, one of those rare weeks where the trajectory of events kind of visibly shifts. And so welcome back to Sea Level. What did the rest of us miss? What did you see?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that it was 850 delegates. They did say, though, that it was the busiest Davos ever, and it certainly felt like that. We arrived on the Tuesday afternoon, and so most people land in Zurich and then actually had to take a helicopter to Davos. We, of course, landed in Zurich and then drove to Davos. It was about 2 hours. So that's how you arrive. You kind of have to drive in or a helicopter in. You can't actually fly in. You can't land in Davos. Imagine that. And for us, though, arriving Tuesday afternoon was actually quite good because literally we got to the front. You first have to go into the Ice Palace, get your badge. Then you can go to your assigned hotel. For people who arrived on the Monday, we were told that it was 2 hours waiting to get to the Ice Palace to get your badge. For us, it was about 30 seconds. But no, it was a great vibe. Very, very busy. Lots and lots of traffic. But you could definitely feel a very consequential Davos.
Yes. Most of us have not had the, of course, the privilege of being in Davos, and especially at the World Economic Forum. I mean, I've been there in the summertime, but nobody's there. Right. But it's a beautiful place. Walk us down the promenade for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Davos is a place of, or it has been a place of polite global cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
The historian and my friend, Sir Neil Ferguson, called the mood this year manic dissonance, right? So for our clients listening, did you feel that like there's kind of like a mix, or what he saw? I'd be more interested to hear what you saw as a delegate, a mix of kind of panic about the end of the old order, but also a lot of kind of maybe excitement about AI and about possibilities. So maybe, take us through that a little bit. What would it, does that track with what you're?
So it's interesting because you would think that it was this whole panic about the end of the world order. Actually, when you talk to people, what was the most talked about was quantum, energy, and AI. And I would say for the most part, it was very positive, very productive, and very optimistic. I would not say that you left there with a feeling of pessimism or concern that, oh my goodness, what's going to happen, the geopolitical situation. No, it was much more, my goodness, we're at this inflection point and the growth from here could be tremendous. right? The talk around AI, you definitely had two camps on the AI conversation. One camp is this is going to cause 20 to 30% destruction of jobs. And we're going to have to find things for these people to do. But I would say more of the conversations that I was a part of and the speeches that I saw, like Jensen Wang as an example, was much more about actually, this is going to create a lot of jobs. The example Jensen Wang gave was of the radiologists, saying radiologists should have been completely eliminated from AI. AI is completely involved with radiology. What they found is that radiologists have a task and they have a purpose. Yes. The task is to review the scans. AI allows them to review far more scans, far more accurately. Their purpose is to serve patients. So because AI is helped with the task, they can do far more tasks. They're far more efficient in the tasks, which allows them to serve far more patients. So there's actually more radiologists today than they've ever been. Right. So it was I felt like a very sort of optimistic on what the future holds, and much less the other argument, which is there's going to be less jobs.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to get you, mic'd up here with this podcast, and especially just a few days after the World Economic Forum. And the reason is that there seem to be two versions of Davos. Yeah. One is, it's the Greenland gamble. It is, the Carney speech, which we can go into a little bit later. Mm-hmm. And then there's the people, the eyewitnesses on the ground, as you felt it. So that is somewhat of a dissonance. You're there and you're saying it is about actually taking maybe a longer run technological view of the technological transformation and so forth, right?
At the end of the day, it was only a few speeches really that were focused on that. You had Zelensky's speech, you had Carney's speech, and you had President Trump's speech. But that's it. Most of the other speeches were about all these other things, about AI, about energy. And that's what most people were talking about. Of the heads of state, one interesting speech was the Indonesian president, who's been in power for a year. And he was talking really about the future of his country and how much potential was in his country, how he's just formed a $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund. And he came to Davos to talk about this $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, a country that actually has a smaller GDP than Canada. So very, very positive and optimistic about the growth and the opportunity in his country.
Right. In some ways, it's kind of the elephant in the room because there are fundamental shifts happening. But when you get a group of business people together,
right,
they're talking about a different long run. One of the things that really struck me, at least about the reportage, is that shift that you're talking about, the abundance shift.
Yes.
So we pivot from, let's say, talking more about sustainability.
Yes.
Than it's talking about abundance.
Yes.
You talk about energy, AI. AI needs massive amounts of power.
Right.
Now, did the energy talk seem like more of a green conversation or a massive energy expansion conversation?
Yes. So great question. So first of all, the whole energy conversation in different buckets was all about how much more energy we need. So Jensen Wang talked about that. Then you had people who were talking about the solution to that energy need. So maybe the best example of solutions was Elon Musk when he spoke. He claimed that in 2 to 3 years, they'll be able to set up data centers in space. Basically, his argument was that 99% of the energy in the world can come from the sun. That's all the energy we really need. So we could have the data centers up in space. We could have the solar panels towards the sun. He talked about the cooling because it's like -5 Kelvin or something like that. The cooling can be brought in from space, and actually it'll be lighter in space to have some of the very, very heavy chips that they're going to have in the future. So he said that's a solution. Then secondly, he claimed, and I've said this to people and I wrote it down, and I've said this to people and people tell me that this is not true, but I'm just a reporter. Okay. That's what the man. So he said that a 100 by 100 mile solar farm can create over 100 gigawatts, up to 500 gigawatts of energy, essentially enough to power America. Now, I've said this to multiple people and they said that's not true.
Not true yet, maybe.
Not true yet, maybe. But the feeling is that we had the capability through sustainable solutions, if necessary, and some future technology by getting things into space to get the power that's necessary to provide the energy that's needed for the data centers. It was also going back to the jobs situation and back to the Jepson's paradox example. One speaker said, because we need so much energy, yes, AI might displace certain jobs that we know of are here today, but we actually need people building these nuclear power plants, building all of the connectivity that we need for the data centers, that's going to create jobs. And we just don't have enough of those skilled trades to actually do some of those things.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to have to invest, and we're going to need more and more people. So there will be jobs. They might be created in different areas.
Yeah, I like to think of it as the ghost in the body, because the ghost is is the cloud. This discussion over the last 20 years of everything is kind of dematerializing, but it's not true, because you, as you say, you actually need the physical body, the infrastructure in order to power these.
That's right.
But it seems like, the investment posture really seems to be shifting.
Yeah.
So from mitigating downside risk in energy to capturing upside from infrastructure expansion.
Yeah.
So like the whole conversation seems to have kind of flipped on its head. But in terms of Canada, Canada possesses a lot of hydroelectric capacity and nuclear expertise, vast natural gas reserves, et cetera. And I wonder, in terms of our strategic assets, those seem to be actually even more important today than they are. And that seems to be one of the kind of quiet messages coming from the WEF.
Yes. Well, so it's funny because when you talk to people who are there, who were not Canadian, to get their view of us, that is absolutely what they know of us. At the end of the day, they do know us for our natural resources, and they do value us for our natural resources, especially mining. And not just mining in Canada, but mining all over the world. And so talking to people from all over the world, they really do know and respect our mining expertise.
Yeah. And as many of our listeners will know, BMO's Metals and Mining Conference is the global leader in this.
Yeah.
And so that is, as a manifestation of, in many ways, how the bank has been a pillar of kind of national development, national economic development for 2 centuries. I think that's a really important point, Del, because one of the things that the opportunity for Canada is to become a keystone power and not just a quarry. Because if they say us as a quarry,
that's right.
just say, well, we'll just, extract and so forth. And that's where the financial institutions, I think, come in, really strategically to say, well, this can be financed, but, we need to be looking beyond that in some ways. One of the perhaps the lighter aspects, or it seems like one of the lighter aspects, is the social element.
Yes.
Of that is like so important because, to meet people, there's an old cliche that banking is a relationship business. It's a cliche for a reason. It's absolutely true. Right. Now, BMO has been coming to that mountain for 40 years.
Yes.
Right. In the days of Bill Mulholland, when they were starting out.
Yeah.
And BMO every year has a special dinner for its clients.
Yes.
Take us through that a little bit.
No, that's very important because what happens is that when you're there, it's an opportunity to meet people from all over the world who you wouldn't get as easy an opportunity to see face to face. It's one thing to meet people via Microsoft Teams or Zoom, but to be able to see that many people face to face in one place, that's what makes such a big difference. And you'd asked me earlier to sort of walk down the promenade. So the way the village is set up, the Ice Palace where the Spengler Cup is every single year. That's the thing people think about that. That's the main hockey area.
Yes.
And then beside that is the Congress Center. And then above that is the promenade where you have a lot of cafes and restaurants, etc. So during the Davos event, those cafes and restaurants are rented out by different companies. One company whose name I won't tell you has a main cafe on the end of the promenade, and they bought the whole building, owned the whole thing, and then rented out to the cafe owner for the rest of the year. So they have it 1 week of the year. Let's call it 2 weeks of the year. So you go from place to place, and that's where people will have their different events and different dinner parties and different things. And it's a great opportunity to meet people and to talk to people from all over the world. We have an event at the Alpine Gold Hotel, which is also where President Trump was purported to have stayed.
Ooh.
And we have a dinner there where we'll bring in Canadian talent. So we'll have a Canadian artist. Every year we'll have a different artist from Canada, and we'll have a dinner there, which is really an opportunity on the last night for people to relax, let their hair down, and enjoy something that is really Canadian centric. And we have different CEOs and different leaders from different companies. And it's a great opportunity for them to really talk to us and for us to get to know them and spend some time with them. And that's where I kind of get what I was talking about. What was the feel? Because now we're almost down to the last day. What was the feel? What did people get out of it? And that's why I say it really was an optimistic AI energy and the future of the growth, the productivity growth that we could see. And I said, well, it was much more that than was any kind of pessimism on geopolitics.
That's I think an amazing insight, because one of the things that people will see Davos and the World Economic Forum is, this kind of, Chardonnay swilling elites, etc. Although there might be, Chardonnay there, it's kind of like, there are two things. One, it's a high level focus group.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And right. And so, and your point about teams, your point about actually knowing something versus talking to someone,
Yeah.
off the record.
Yes.
And that is like absolutely essential for trust.
Right.
Right. So it's like high level focus group. And then, as we know, trust is migrating from institutions to businesses and to people.
Yeah.
So that is the first point. The second point is you're Canada's ambassadors in some ways.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So that's why you insist on, the say Canadian talent, and it might not seem to the average person as, as critical, but in the world,
Yeah.
we have to kind of represent.
That's right.
One of the things that people kind of latched onto was the speech by Prime Minister Carney. Were you in the room, or were you in a overflow room, or what was the story there?
Yeah. So we were very fortunate for Prime Minister Carney's speech to literally be 3 rows from the front, and the room was absolutely full, and his speech was very well received.
Amazing, amazing. And also this is, about a week or 10 days out. And so people are kind of trying to sift through it and trying to see, whether there's a rupture, whether there's not, whether it was more intentional rather than accidental and so forth. In your view, what would clients of the bank kind of take away from this kind of experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you look at, and I'm sure people have the opportunity to see it and even read the transcript, at the end of the day, what we took away from that speech was that Canada's about to grow here. We are actually, with this prime minister, on the precipice of incredible growth, because we are going to remove a lot of the interprovincial barriers, which, depending on what you look at, we think that could be 200 to 600 basis points in GDP growth. Just removing interprovincial barriers. And he talked about that for Canada. He talked about not free trade agreements with other countries, but improving relations with some of these other countries that we've had poor relations with in the last decade. And so that's new for us. And that's an opening for us. We have also historically, and I really look at this personally as a shame over the last 40, 50 years, we've underinvested in our military. 4 of my 6 uncles on my mother's side were Canadian military, from World War II to Korea to Blue Hats in Cyprus. We've underinvested in that military. Now we're going to, he said, by 2030, significantly increase our investment. So from a bank standpoint and from an economic standpoint, when you listen to the things that he was saying, this is incredible growth for Canada. Very optimistic. We do need more customers, right? We do need to open up to improve relationships with countries that we haven't had relationships with. So I thought it was great. And I think that's why he got the standing ovation.
It's so interesting to see it depends on the lens that you see all of these things, right? Because if it's always through, when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you've got politics, it is always politics all the time. But But one of the great things that that you bring to the table is looking at it from a business and client perspective. And one of those perspective is in Canada, we're seeing $1 trillion wealth transfer,
Yes.
generationally,
Yes.
right? And so after seeing the world in transition at Davos, how do we prepare for the next generation? You started to talk a little bit about that in the Canadian mundane language of interprovincial barriers as well, that they're important.
Yes.
But what do we need to pass on to the next generation? You need to pass on not just capital, but maybe judgment,
Yes.
maybe the right partners,
Right,
that
right,
kind of thing.
right.
How do we make that happen?
Yeah. One of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, look, as you go through this transition, the reality is the population is aging. There is going to be this $1 trillion plus transfer of wealth, and families have to have a plan. There's something like 60+% of families that are going through this in the next lot that do not even have a plan as to how you're going to. Step one is actually getting yourself a plan as to how you're going to do this. And then step two is educating G2 on how likely it is that that business that they're inheriting is going to change. And managing that wealth is going to change. The need for professional advice today is more important than ever because, quite frankly, one thing is interesting, Dr. Mussio, which we kind of forget. You never had this level of wealth transfer in the history of the world. It's never happened before. You never had this many people inheriting this much wealth ever in history.
Right.
Massive middle class and this massive wealth transfer. So advice is very important, and getting that plan early is very, very important.
And this, in my view, is why it's so brilliant that you were a delegate at Davos, because you can connect the mountain with the country and the short term, which with the long term. So you've got the macro and the micro.
Yeah.
So you were just exposed to the world in transition, all of those conversations with the macro, and that how that nets out for the client.
Yes.
For the operational intelligence, and that is like, I think that is the great value of being there for a week.
No, that's right.
And talking to people. So we need global expertise, local expertise, and that specific kind of wealth management brilliance. And that, I think, when it brings it all together, then it is it's a powerful package for people. Del, thank you so much. This has been wonderful and a real privilege, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Charles. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been the Markets Plus podcast, and we've been in conversation with Deland Kamanga, Group Head of BMO Wealth Management, and me, your humble servant, Laurence Mussio, Chair of the Long Run Institute and Special Advisor to the Office of the CEO, BMO Financial Group. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. For more episodes, visit bmocm.com/marketsplus.
The views expressed here are those of the participants and may not necessarily represent those of BMO Capital Markets, its affiliates, or subsidiaries.
For BMO disclosures, please visit bmocm.com/podcast/disclaimer.